Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora Chewy, how are you, sir?
I am not too bad. I am glad to be wrapped up all warm and dry.
Yes.
Not everybody's getting that choice tonight up north from the looks of it.
The news, I was down in the studio actually doing a little bit of editing and breaking news. Auckland goes into state of emergency. I was like, holy crap, this is... What? It just kind of seemed to come out of nowhere. I went and had a look at Philip Duncan on Weather Watch, he's kind of independent weather in New Zealand. And they ended up saying kind of earlier or late morning that there was a massive rain cloud or rainstorm coming through Auckland. But it just kind of hit. And if you're in that region, obviously top half of the North Island, you've been hit, you get hit again. We hope you're all right and you hope you're safe. But it was, it was a bit crazy, wasn't it? It's just, and just like that, it's happened again. And of course, now the question starts. It's a bit like when a tragedy happens, you ask all the questions around why has this happened. It's like, well, here we go. Global warming conversation again, infrastructure conversation again, three waters conversation again to do with stormwater especially. And this is what, the third time this year? Third time for Auckland this year.
Yeah, I did notice Mia Brown hit the emergency button pretty quick. I wonder if that discussion was like, do you recommend... We're doing it. Hit the button.
Yeah, I actually noticed I watched One News tonight and they were talking to parents who were picking up kids from school and all of them were saying, oh, this time we moved really quickly. So even the parents of school kids and stuff were like, well, you know, we might have been a bit lackadaisical last time, but this time we're into it straight away. So I think Wayne Brown's out of Auckland because I saw the deputy mayor talking at the press conference and she said something like, he's bestowed his powers upon me to make the decisions because maybe he's international or something, or
probably for the best.
Yeah, Free Soul says he's in Sydney, so there you go. So he's out of Auckland at the moment. We've got lots to talk about tonight, and I'll tell you if you've seen my tweet so far this evening that I have caused a bit of an international incident to do with Hollywood and the All Blacks. But before we do that, yeah, I know. Actually, we've tested nothing this evening, bro. So I hope everything works. I guess we'll find out shortly. I haven't even shared my screen yet. I'm doing that right now as I speak to you. Before we do that, we're also going to talk about the teacher strike in the South Island today, and more teacher strikes coming around the country. And what I thought I'd do, because I like to contextualize things, yeah? And we keep hearing teachers aren't paid enough, right? Now, when I say we keep hearing it, we don't hear what does that mean? So the first thing I've done on Twitter just a half hour ago or so is ask you guys, in your opinion, what would be a fair salary to pay a senior teacher with no management responsibilities? Now, that's a little bit of lingo around teacher. I think it's called an MU, a management unit. So if you're like, for example, the head of English and you're an English teacher, you get paid a salary for being an English teacher, and then you get a management unit, which might be another $4,000 or $8,000 or whatever a year to be a senior, to have responsibility. If you have no management responsibilities, you call it a Scale A teacher. So basically you get to a Scale A teacher at the top of their game who doesn't have any responsibilities at all other than teaching. What should they be paid? And I've put 70, 80, 90, 100 plus K on the little thing. It's a bit hard because what is 100 plus K? Some people might think 200 would be appropriate. Some might think 110. I don't know, but as a bit of an idea to get from you, because tonight we're also going to have a look at what teachers earn. Because what I haven't heard many people talk about is how much do teachers actually earn. We've heard the $50-something thousand, but that's for a beginning teacher. That's at the start of a career, which is why I've put in my question a senior teacher. So yeah, I already agree that $50-something thousand for someone with a degree as a teacher looking after our kids is ridiculous. But what do teachers earn? I.e., what can they earn? What is the dollar figure they earn once they're sort of at the top of their career, 5, 6, 7 years in? When I started working in radio, I was earning $35,000 a year. The breakfast guys were earning $300. So, you don't go radio hosts aren't paid enough. You might say overnight hosts aren't paid enough. but the breakfast guys are more making out like bandits. So what do some of the more experienced teachers earn? I've got those numbers, which we'll look at later on, but if you want to chip in on that, you can do it in the chat, I guess, or you can do it on Twitter, and we'll have a look what you guys have got to say. And if you want to put a reply to that, you can tweet me a reply or put it into the chat as to if you want to put a figure to the 100K plus. If you think it's 100K plus, but you want to be a bit more specific, then go for it. And then we'll use your information later on tonight to have a look at what you think would be fair and what teachers are earning. And then we can have the actual conversation as opposed to having half the information to have the conversation, Chewy.
Yep. No, I've actually got some comments on that from a friend of mine who's a teacher, and I think she summed it up really well.
Cool.
So I'd love to get that out when we get to that bit.
Cool. So here's a little story that I used to about a whole lot of something and a little bit. What's that song? That's LMNOP. That's what's in my head. Here's a little story that should be told about a whole. I've just been listening to them over the weekend. I'm starting to prepare a playlist for my 50th birthday, Chewy. And I started playing. Do you know the band 8? They're an Auckland band 8. They're kind of a rock band, really phenomenal band. Paulie Russell, the former drummer of Supergroove, and Bruce Conlon, the mates, they were in this band together. They're now in a band called Midwave Breaks. And Paulie was the drummer for Shay Fu and a whole bunch of hip hop artists as well. They did this band called 8, and they're really, really good, really successful. And they're not successful commercially, but really popular. Like there's a record store in Auckland that there was called Real Groovy, and they'd produce their own CDs and they kept selling out. And even the guys from Real Groovy were like, these just all your friends coming and buying CDs to make it look like you guys, but they were actually that popular. They'd do a gig in a weekend, then they'd sell out their independently produced CDs at Real Groovy that week, sort of thing. Nice. So anyway, why did I start telling the story? Oh,
I have no idea.
Because I'm making a playlist. So I went through and I was like, I'm going to play 8 on my playlist, and then I'm like Foo Fighters on my playlist, LMNOP on my playlist, and music for the birthday party. That's why a long way of saying that's why LMNOP is in my head at the moment. That's why. Right. So here's a really interesting story that's coming out of stuff. Hurricanes captain Artie Savia bites back at Bart Simpson. Did he just say Wellington sucks? We're the champs. New Zealand national sport has become the latest victim on The Simpsons, with particular shade thrown on the ball skills of our capital city. In a new episode of the long-running animated series, Bart is seen gambling on, quote, New Zealand rules rugby before declaring Wellington sucks at our national sport. The episode, titled A Very Hungry Caterpillar, aired in the US on Monday, local time, and according to the Simpsons wiki page, sees Springfield forced into lockdown after a plague of insects infects the town. A clip shared on social media... in a clip shared on social media, the elder Simpson can be seen checking out the Odds Monster crypto gambling website, which reveals sport betting options like mental gymnastics, professional standing, unimpressive jumping, and college drinking. That's a screen grab of the shot, so it says all the things down the side. And there's the New Zealand rugby. New Zealand rules rugby. Wellington versus Auckland, Tauranga versus Christchurch, Rotorua versus Dunedin. And then if you scroll down a bit further, you get to see who is the person who shared it on.
I didn't even clock that. I saw that, and I didn't even realize it was you. Yeah.
So because I've been chilling out this week and relaxing, Monday afternoon, I was in my little old big comfy chair. You can see, before 7 p.m. And I was watching The Simpsons from the weekend. I hadn't watched The Simpsons for years, and I thought, it was because I had been blobbing because I'm recovering. I thought I'll just have a look at an episode, and this comes up, and I thought it was hilarious, and I thought I'd clip this and put it out on Twitter, and this is what I clipped.
Looking for the most player-friendly teasers and parlays online? Try oddsmonster.crypto.
Don't mind if I do. Ooh, New Zealand rugby. Oh, whatever rugby is, Wellington sucks at it.
Oh, yeah. Roasted.
And I thought it was kind of cute and kind of funny, and I shared it, and it's gone a little bit bananas. It's had, it had? Nearly 8,000 views. And I got messaged by a reporter, and this is the reporter here. That is Artie Savia watching the clip that I put out to bombard Bart Simpson saying Wellington rugby sucks. So,
he's coming for you, bro.
I might have caused a slight international incident between the Simpsons and World Rugby. But there you go.
In all things, Wellington's had it far too good for far too long.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone that lived there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Can be a little bit sensitive. Actually, this reminds me, just a segue time.
Sure.
One of the best pieces of bathroom graffiti I ever saw was somebody taking a black marker to a toilet stall to say, why can't everybody just love each other and get along? And someone had added to it, all right, Wellington, calm the fuck down.
Hey, big show tonight. Some really sad news coming out of Northland. Well, it's. I guess we should preface this by saying we don't know exactly what's happened yet with that young teenager out of Whangarei Boys High School, but it doesn't sound good. We'll have a bit of a look at that. That's incorporated in our look at the storm. We are going to have a look at the teachers and teaching salaries. So let us know in the chat or on my Twitter feed. You can fill out the poll what you think a Scale A teacher should earn. And there's something else. Oh yeah, Te Pāti Māori being kicked out of Parliament today. That's in there as well, which we'll be having a look at. But first of all, let's say a huge thanks to all of our patrons. I think we're at about 47 now. Last year we talked about trying to make it to 50 would be a nice sort of yardstick, a milestone. I was looking at a pretty big podcast in America today, and they had like 500 patrons, and I thought, gosh, if we're 1/70th the size of America, our little podcast can get 1/10 the size of patrons. That's a pretty awesome little response, actually.
Per capita. Per capita is always the way.
We always try and win per capita in New Zealand. That's how we do everything, isn't it? It's that way we try and get on top of everything in the world. Yeah, in the Olympics, man, per capita, we're very, very successful with our gold medal haul. So if you are interested, come join the team, be a part of what we do. Help us get to 50 patrons, and you do that by heading to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Right. I don't know where to start, Chewy. Where should we start tonight?
Oh, you could throw a dart at your clipboard, see where we are.
Let's start here, right? Because actually people are in there. We'd be keen to hear from you if you're in the Auckland region, if you've been affected by it. Let's have a little bit of B-roll of what's been going on in Auckland. I did notice though today, Chewy, that in all the news reports, I had a look at 3 News and I had a look at 1 News as well. It seems like all the rain and stuff, all the flooding had cleared away. But so there's a pretty big difference between this one and the last one, is that this seems to be, they used to call them weather bombs, like a boom, it's happened and it's gone. Still bad, still terrible. I think I heard 80 mils of rain. And yeah, there was an interesting piece in one of the items talking about people being told to leave work early and to be safe, and then they all tried to leave work early at the same time, and then no one could get a bus because everyone's then told to stay home, leave work early and stay home. And so there was a few things, but you can see weather happening through Auckland today, pretty bad, heading down towards Coromandel. If you're in the kind of Coromandel area now, you're probably receiving a little bit of this at the moment. So maybe let us know if you're in that region, what's it like at your place. Hopefully you're safe and be well. It doesn't seem to be anywhere near as significant as the last one. But, Chewy, it does raise all sorts of questions, again, about climate change, about what's happening with our weather and about infrastructure. And it does just bring us all the way back to that part of the conversation around Three Waters that involves infrastructure to do with stormwater. Because it seems that many of these places that are flooding, one of the biggest issues is they don't have the capacity to take the water away from the surface, hence the flooding. And that comes back to stormwater and infrastructure, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. We take huge areas of land, we slap concrete on it, and we just don't have enough surface area to soak it all up. It's all piped underground, and all our creeks are underground and all of that sort of stuff. And then you combine that with decades of underfunding and then a rapidly changing climate. And these old systems that we've ignored for decades have to cope with even more rain over a shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
This is what they're saying. When people were saying, global warming and then climate change and that sort of thing, we weren't talking about the oceans coming up to waist deep in a couple of years. We were talking about more extreme weather, wetter weather for us because we're surrounded by the ocean. So yeah, this is, I worry about it being the new normal and everybody just going, oh, this is the way it's always been. We don't need to do anything. But yeah, it's bad and it's expensive. And
yeah, that's an interesting idea. Interesting idea about it being expensive, because I mean, if it keeps, like I heard about someone today who's just done they just made an insurance claim for flooding. It wasn't to do with this, but it was $37,000. And every time an insurance company does that, then that gets funded by the pool of money that everyone else pays in their in their monthly amounts or their yearly amounts. And then if that keeps getting paid out more and more and more and more, what happens for people protecting their property and protecting their things? What happens to insurance? What happens when EQC has another earthquake, or the natural side of things, and the government having to cover costs? And I mean, it seems that we are not planning well for, it's that, do we adapt, which is what National's saying, to climate change, to weather situations? Do we adapt when National says that? What they're basically saying is they're throwing their hands in the air and going, there's nothing we can do about this. We just need to adapt to what's going on. The problem is, if we just adapt, then what we adapt to today won't be working in 20 years from now when it's continued on. So the plan to adapt and reduce is probably what we need to be looking at. But I don't know. I don't feel confident in any of the political parties at the moment that anyone's got a particular answer for this. And one of the reasons I'm not confident in the current government is they've been basically, they've pussyfooted away or been bullied away from the Three Waters thing, when actually, when it comes to stormwater in particular, that's one of the massive things that we need to work on for this issue for all of the country, not just Auckland.
I mean, one quite a shocking graph, I thought. I'm going to put it up on the screen now. Accumulated rainfall measured at Auckland Airport, basically going back to 1963, and
Wow.
all those grey lines there are basically the spread. The blue line is this year.
Wow.
So it's a little bit different. And that purple bit, that is I think the last big storm. So it just took a big jump up.
I mean, if we're looking at climate change, and we're looking at the stats around climate change and the sort of research on climate change, we do have to be careful not to take this year as gospel, because there are ebbs and flows. But we can't sit back and go, is this an ebb or is this a flow? We have to do something, because if it's not just a one-off year, if this is the beginning of something more serious, we can't go, oh, that was an anomaly, and then next year have it happen again. Oh, that was just another anomaly. We could have a 10-year cycle of anomalies, and then after that, there is no turning back. So I guess there's also finding that middle ground between looking at what's happening this year, what's happening in the research, and what we need to project to figure it out. But this is, I guess, those patterns of what we've been told is going to happen. So it is what's happening. So I used to have this debate when I was working in Talkback about climate change, and it was still sort of a lot of debate around it. And I just used to talk to people about pollution. I said, okay, if you don't want to handle the climate change conversation, let's just talk about pollution. Because if you tick all those pollution boxes, i.e. solving pollution, then you're sort of solving the climate change problems as well, because they mirror one another. You can bring it back to something else. So if we look at the stormwater, for example, or we look at what's happening with rainfall at the moment, if we start to try and make our infrastructure workable for the next 100 years, then whether it's an anomaly or whether it's part of the forthcoming pattern, you are still going to help deal with either future anomalies or the overall issue. And it just feels like that adaptation but also reduction is what we need to be looking at to try and fix this place up for 200 years from now.
Now, I've just seen a comment on the chat, which I think is probably worth highlighting. John here says, okay, next summer we can expect disastrous weather. What do we do about it now? And I think for me that stuck a pin in it, right? Because we've got heaps of noise out there going, look, long term we're completely screwed, and it's a big problem. Yeah. And everybody's got to do better, and nobody's doing enough. And at that point, that can be like, well, what can I do? And then we have this other issue, which is a lot more in our face of like, okay, climate change is an unstoppable juggernaut. What do we do to mitigate it now? And I guess we've seen politicians talk about mitigation and that sort of thing as if that's the only suggestion. We're going to kind of hold both thoughts in our heads at the same time. But yeah, I think Three Waters is 100% part of the puzzle that we have to solve. is that all of our stormwater infrastructure, basically nationwide, is not up to the task of what's coming. As far as hot and wet, and then what sort of storage options do we have when it swings around and it's hot and dry? Because I remember in the South Island, many years ago when we had a drought and the hydro lakes were empty essentially, and there were like brownouts where we couldn't use power or the street lights were off and that sort of thing. And when our electricity generation is so focused on the hydro dams, it's funny to be even mentioning that when Auckland's getting absolutely hammered by all the water they could ever want and way more than they need. But it also wasn't that long ago that the Auckland reservoir was too low and there was water restrictions. It's part of the same thing. We have to manage these bigger lows and taller peaks. The consistency of our weather is going out the window.
I like the term brownout. It always makes me think of the mayor of Auckland not talking to media. That's what I was thinking when I heard that term now. It's a brownout, guys. It's not coming. It's a brownout. Yeah, look, I just, because the extremes are getting more extreme, it would appear. We like looking at the research, not even just looking at what we're seeing, because what we're seeing is anecdotal. And in our lifetimes, even in our decade, you got to look at the past 100 years. But it seems that it's happening more. And the other thing is that one of the things I despise about this debate with people who don't want to be part of it is, what is the downside of wanting cleaner waterways, cleaner air? Like, what's the downside here? Is it because you're being tricked into it by, the one world order, but you still have cleaner waterways and cleaner streams and better air quality, which just show me the downside. And you have stone fruit up in Central Otago that can still be manufactured, produced, grown as well. You have schools in Auckland not having to shut because of flooding. Where's the downside? Even if people are wrong, but they're doing something to mitigate the weather, what's the downside? There's no downside.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you want to look at it from a capitalist point of view, there's opportunities for new industries, and periods of change have always been good for the people that are able to capitalize on it. People that come up with new technology and that sort of thing. I often think when farmers are going, don't take away my diesel ute off me. It's like, why is someone like the Federated Farmers not seeing the writing on the wall here and going, hey, rugged individual farmers, that you have the opportunity to use some of your land to generate your own electricity and run your vehicles off sunlight. Do you guys not see the benefit of that?
Yeah, it's a strange one. Like I've always said, I'd love to build a house one day. I don't think I ever will, but I'd love to build a house one day. If I did, I would have it covered in solar, and I would have, even if I was in the city, I'd still have water tanks in the ground. I'll do a bunch of extra things, spend 10% more, and be as self-sufficient as possible. Like The Good Life from the 1970s. Do you remember that comedy series, The Good Life?
I mean, one that I think about, because I'm quite interested in EVs and do way too much research, is like you often see people going, the New Zealand infrastructure is not set up for EVs. We won't have the generation for everyone to plug in their vehicles every night, that sort of thing. That may very well be a problem. So why don't we get ahead of it? Where are the incentives for people to set up solar panels on their roof? The idea of generating your own electricity and micro generation into the grid could solve that problem.
Yeah, part of the problem with that is most power companies don't do that very well. Like parts of the world that started it, people were making pretty good money off putting power back into the grid. There's a thing, so I do a bit of research on this as well. There's a thing called a sunny island. If anyone out there is ever looking at getting solar power, make sure you get what's called a sunny island. Because the thing about having power on your roof, like solar panels on your roof, if it just goes into your house and into the grid, if the grid goes down, you lose power, even though you've got solar, because you've got no storage unit. Whereas off-grid, you've got batteries. There's an in-between ground. It's called a sunny island. And basically what happens is it comes off your roof, it goes into an intermediary, which is a bank of batteries, and then it goes into the grid, back to the grid, which therefore means if you do have a power outage of the grid, you've still got your batteries to maybe give you 1, 2, 3, 4 days of power to do it. So if you're ever going to get it, it's a word of advice from Uncle Pat, investigate the term sunny island, as in the sun, as in an island. to put between your solar panels and the grid, and then you'll have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Battery capacity is so useful when it comes to solar. Don't just give it straight to the electricity companies.
We need to probably, and this is this might feel like a bit of a clunky because we started to talk about EVs and solar, a bit of a clunky transition. And I apologise about that because this is a very, very serious story, and one that kind of hits pretty close to my heart because I remember in 2008 a certain school in East Auckland losing a bunch of kids in a canyoning tragedy, and I knew a lot of people from that school and from that area. A part of the push the wrong button. There we go. A part of the storm today was. Now I'm going to still say allegedly because I haven't read or seen anywhere that someone saw a student swept away. What I've seen, now I could be wrong, that might have been said and I might have missed it. If it has been, then tell me in the chat. But what I've seen is there's a student missing and they're assuming that a student's been swept away. Now I've said it's a tragedy because it doesn't look good, but they are also saying that they may have been swept into a part of the caves where there's a place for them to stay and be safe, and they'll get found later on. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed that's what happened.
God,
at the
I
moment,
hope so. It sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it does sound terrifying, but at the moment, this is the reports. I'll just read what the report says, and I won't put any other opinion on it. Student swept away on school trip wasn't meant to be caving, leaked email reveals. A student swept away on a school caving trip was meant to be rock climbing, but bad weather forced the trip underground instead, stuff can reveal. The Year 11 Whangarei Boys High School student remains unaccounted for more than 6 hours after the outdoor education class he was with got into trouble in Abbey Caves near Whangarei. Why the group of at least 15 students was underground given the weather warnings that were in place for the area is now being questioned. One person's Stuff spoke to said school played Russian roulette with children's lives. Stuff has obtained an email that shows how the school trip had factored the weather into their plans for the trip. The email from the school's head of outdoor education, Stevie Hernick, was sent to parents last Friday. It said due to forecasted rain, they had modified planned trips. Initially, we had rock climbing scheduled. This has been changed to caving. A parent who said her son's friend had been in the group who entered the cave a day earlier said he told them the water had been above their heads in some areas. Now, we have to be a bit careful with that because do you know the term spelunking, Chewy? Yeah, so spelunking is caving where you go swimming in and under things. So that sounds, in the context of the story, it's like, what the fuck are they doing with water over their head? Sometimes that's what part of caving sometimes is, actually getting in and going under things in water. So we don't know whether that was how, I don't know whether that's how the cave always was, or it being over their head was unusual for that cave. If it was unusual for that cave, what the fuck? If that's what it always was, then I just don't want to read too much into that because we don't have all the information yet. But it's a horrific story, and we heard on the news tonight, I think I watched TVNZ News, about the father turning up and not finding out until he turned up to the actual, the roadblocks, that it was his son that was missing, sort of thing. So it sounds terrible. I don't even want to minimize it by saying there's no good news here because that's obvious. It just sounds terrible, terrible, terrible all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, let's just park the fact that something horrible's happened to a kid. Like, even if it hadn't, the idea of going underground into a cave when there's the weather report that there was, and my understanding is at 9 a.m. this morning there was an orange alert for heavy rainfall in that area.
Right.
They should have canned it. They should have canned it. Postpone it. Do it next week. I mean, I've been involved in planning expeditions with young people and that sort of thing. We've gone up into the Alps and the Alpine lakes and stuff like that. And it's just, you don't mess with the weather. You're reading the forecast way out and you're being super conservative because if you fuck it up, this sort of stuff happens. And I'm just blown away that they've missed all of that, or at least seem to have missed all of that, or made the wrong decisions. Someone's going to get reamed over this.
I imagine what it will be, Chewy, is, and look, this is now opinion and just thinking out loud. I don't know is the answer, but I can imagine we've all done this. We've all gone driving on a day that maybe we should have stayed at home and it's been fine. Or we've all gone out in conditions where it could have been slightly dodgy, but it's been fine. But the problem is the one time in 100 it's not fine, this is what happens. And that's why you shouldn't do it the other 99. But as human beings, we tend to. The difference here as a parent is when the kid leaves the front door of your house, Well, this is how the law used to be. I'd be interested to see if it still is that. Basically, once the kid leaves your property, the kid is the responsibility of the school until he or she gets back to your property, right? So it's not like just while they're on school grounds. Could you imagine being a parent and having your kid leave the house this morning, go off on basically a PE expedition and not come back tonight? I don't know what or who or how or where, but this is the worst of the worst. And I just, I'm going to hold back a little bit on opinions around the school yet, because we will see what happens. But the statement that they put out today, I thought was a little bit. I mean, it kind of said that we're all feeling terrible, but it's like I just don't know. I don't know if it's like family only. The only focus right now is family of the missing kid. Nothing else should be getting said. Family of the missing kid. Nothing else.
Yeah, I saw a similar comment, and like I realize we're talking about it now. I kind of agree. There's going to be plenty of time to litigate this and point fingers afterwards. But yeah, like hopefully they pull this kid out of a cave, and it's like, wow, you guys got real lucky there.
So 15 years ago, I was living in Auckland, but I'd spent a lot of time in East Auckland. Spent a lot of time in Howick and Pakuranga. That was sort of when I was at Teachers Training College. That was sort of my hood out that way. And as you guys all know, I've had a lot of religious dealings in my lifetime. And in Mangiapoto Canyon disaster in 2008, 6 students and 1 teacher from Elam Christian School, which is in Botany, which is a part of Howick, were killed at the Sir Edmund Hillary Outdoor Pursuit Centre in a flash flood after a thunderstorm caused the Mangatepopo stream to rise rapidly. An in-depth investigation found significant failings at the centre that led to the disaster, and it was fined $480,000 for health and safety breaches. And it's I mean, you don't want to compare tragedies, 6 person versus currently 1 missing, but we've seen this story, certainly chapters of this story before, and it's just. Yeah. I mean, I don't know at what point criminal charges or activity should be a part of our system, but it's just a kid. I don't care. Even a fluke accident, a kid should never leave their family's door in the morning to walk to school and not come back that night because of something that's happened in their education system. It just should not happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to something I was involved with in cadet forces survival course that ended up happening basically on the edges of a former tropical cyclone.
Yeah.
And that got very, very hairy. And it was so analyzed afterwards, and everybody go, okay, so what were the decision-making points? I remember being really, really focused on at that point of like, who decided, who had checked this? What was the decision-making process? What things changed? When you're responsible for people's children, it's like there is no thing is too safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's the thing is, I mean, I'm a fairly cautious person at the best of times. Like, and I mean, it's not big issues, but like I'm the kind of person that would rather take my kid to the doctor if it wasn't needed than not take my kid to the doctor and it turning more serious. Like my previous partner, I'd always have that kind of debate. Like, well, I'll just take them. I don't care. But he has a fever. I know they've had it before, but I'd rather go and have the doctor say it's fine than not go and then at 3 o'clock in the morning be rushing off to hospital. I'm happy to take that risk. So I take caution in that sort of way. So when it comes to looking after someone else's kids, they're in your charge, then I just think when we talk about we take 99 risks, but the 100th time it bites us, we should take none of them. Yeah. When you're in charge of someone else's kids, you should take none of them.
I mean, in the circumstances that I'm talking about, the trip that I went on, we were on Defence Force property with Defence Force instructors, active military people, trained youth leaders in the cadet forces, and we still ended up with 5 cases of hypothermia, a fractured leg, and I think 8 people being helicoptered out. So, wow. I mean, and that was, at no point did we lose someone.
Yeah.
Oh God, I can't imagine. I just can't imagine.
Let's have a look. If you've got any, we won't leave all these texts until the end of the show like we did last night. If you've got any you want to get out now, let's get them out now. But before, as you're looking for the ones you want to put up, let me just remind you as well that if you are interested in, we're going to talk about teachers' salaries at the end of the last part of the show. And we're asking you, it's on my Twitter, if you want to go to Pat Britton on Twitter, in your opinion, what would a fair salary be to pay a senior teacher with no management responsibilities? In other words, a teacher who's in the classroom and that's their full-time job. They're not a team leader. They're not the head of English. They're the teacher. They're as senior as they can get, so they might have been doing it for 10 or 12 years. I don't know what the pay scale is. What should you pay that person? And the options I've put up are 70K, 80K, 90K, or 100K plus. So we're going to reference this because we are going to have a look at what teachers earn tonight, because part of this conversation that we don't often hear is teachers telling us they don't earn enough, but what do they actually earn? And what do you think they should earn? Like if you're sitting at home on minimum wage, what's that, $22 an hour, that's 40 grand a year. You know, maybe $55,000 to a teacher sounds like bloody Shangri-La to you, but what do you think would be a good salary, a fair salary for a full-time scale A senior teacher with no management responsibilities? Pat Britton on Twitter, or you can mention it in the chat and we'll bring some stuff up there. What's in the chat, Joey?
All right. Simple Reality says, Whangarei boys high school failed completely over the loss of a student in a cave. Significant weather event broadcast for several days, yet no one had the sense to cancel the cave trip. Yep. We have arrest JK. My sister got trapped caving by flood water with no warning. Was stuck for 2 days, but was okay. So there's hope.
That wasn't like in a cave in Thailand with 11 other people, wasn't it? By chance? No, probably not.
And then they were rescued by Elon Musk's submarine.
Yeah.
Gareth says this has hit the Whangarei community really hard. Everyone I hear is talking about it. It's very sad. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those ones where you really hope for a movie ending to this one.
But that's it. I might sound like Pollyanna, but until we know what's happening, I'll still be holding on to it. Hopefully he's okay. He's been swept down the cave and there's an air pocket or there's a thing and he can't get out, and that's still plan A. Yep. That's still plan A.
Yep, absolutely. I'll save these comments until we're actually talking about the teachers. Betty Mac, as an Aucklander, I most often hear that Auckland sucks. So it's great to hear Bart Simpson's opinion. It's true.
It's pretty funny. True. I think it's hilarious. And the thing that when I clipped it and put it out, I just kind of put it out because I thought it was funny. And I put hashtag Wellington sucks. Not because I was saying Wellington sucks, but because that's what was said in the thing. And I don't think anyone's taking it too seriously. But it is funny how, and some of the, I think Byron put up a tweet to reply to my tweet saying, someone's talking about New Zealand. We do this thing where someone's talking about us. It's the most amazing thing.
Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And Gareth here says, I'm an insurance broker. Rates are skyrocketing. Insurers are currently negotiating reinsurance treaties at 30th of June. After this, expect significant increases, maybe 50% or more. Holy shit.
Well, this happens. This happened when Christchurch had the quakes. And I think it was AMI. Is AMI, AMG? One of the big ones. The rates went up around the whole country because of Christchurch, because, that's what happens. If you're a business and your expenses go up to a small sector of your customers, all of the customers help cover that cost. You don't just apply it onto that one group of people. So, I can imagine with the 3 incidents in Auckland, or the top half of the North Island this year, that's going to be significant. I mean, I think that they said, didn't they? At least the government response was, it was a similar amount to the Christchurch quake, the actual cost of insurance, I think. I could be wrong with that.
And look, as someone that was looking to buy a house around that time, started looking at buying a house around that time, all of my initial approaches to banks and that sort of thing, they almost had a script of like, oh, okay, this customer is ringing from Wellington and he's looking to buy a house. Right. Give him the earthquake script. The insurance rates, and they'll go, no. I'm not looking in Wellington. I'm looking in Dunedin. And you'd almost hear someone go, oh, thank God.
Yeah, just not South
it's not in the area
Dunedin,
that's not part of that. I think that's what you're going to be looking at going forward, is that these insurance companies who obviously their businesses did not give you money if they can avoid it, are going to be looking at things like floodplains, coastal areas, places prone to slips and weather. Is your house on top of a cliff? Is it on top of a fault line? And the moral of the story that I have for you all, chat, scattered right throughout the country, it's moved to Dunedin.
Well, yeah, but that was the same for Christchurch pre 2011. Those fault lines were like, where the fuck have these come from?
No, Christchurch always had problems, man. It was always coming. Always coming. Horrible city. Horrible. Too flat is the problem.
Yeah, I had someone describe Christchurch to me once as the biggest small town in New Zealand. We were talking about moving places, and they were like, well, if you don't like small town New Zealand, don't move to Christchurch, because it's just the biggest small town in New Zealand with all the same kind of attitude. I tell you what, though, this is completely a tangent and completely frivolous. Have you seen what's happening with the weather in the next couple of days in Dunedin? Tomorrow's high is 8. The next day's high is 6 here in Dunedin.
Fantastic.
Cold snap coming. Yeah.
Cheese roll weather.
We'll be freezing up in here. We'll have all our pipes will be freezing and exploding. That'll be what we get. Something like that. All right, let's keep trucking, shall we? Because this is something that happened whilst I was away in Fiji last week, and that's at least how I remember that week off. Something like that, at least, anyway. But Meka Whaitiri cut out of Labour. I'm done. I'm done with you fools. I'm out of here. No explanation. Didn't tell the Prime Minister. No, nothing. We said we were going to cover each of these big stories off one night, but just today, by chance, she's also done an exclusive with TVNZ Breakfast and explained a bit more about what's going on. So let's have a listen. Very first question that she is asked by Jenny May, I think Clarkson now, Jenny May Clarkson was the obvious one. Why did you leave Labour?
It's always been a calling of mine. Coming to a place like Wellington so many years ago, the messages my grandmother came as to why you come to Wellington, to learn how Wellington operates, to tour the Pākehā, to turn around, to help and aid your people. It's been my calling. It's been my calling to return back to an unapologetically Māori party.
What is it about the Labour Party that made you cross the floor, though, to Te Pāti Māori, and why now, 5 months out from the general election?
Actually, it was a calling deep in my puku that I had to do this. The timing was right for me and my whānau, and we made the decision, and, here we are.
There'll be people listening to this going, that's not a reason. Was there a policy within Labour that you absolutely didn't agree with? Was there a policy in Te Pāti Māori that you felt that's where you need to be pushing that agenda?
Our people understand the actions I've taken. It wasn't an easy one, Jenny May, but it was deep within my puku and within my ngākau to return to Te Pāti Māori, who unashamedly are Māori. It is a calling that was very strong to me, and as discussed with my whānau, this is the decision we've made. Many of your viewers may not understand that, but as a Māori, they will understand that calling, that beckoning, who we are as Māori, our tikanga, our whakapapa, and that's what was calling me. And the timing was right for me and my whānau, and I've made that decision.
This is about Māori intellect, not a Pākehā intellect. So Pākehā intellect will come from here, her Māori intellect comes from her ngākau and her puku. And so you'll understand that, Jenny May, when you, on your journey to learn your reo, you followed your Māori intellect, you followed your Māori puku and your ngākau to have that connection with your whakapapa, and that's what Meka's done, is gone back to her whakapapa.
There you go. So there's it seems not to, again, minimise perhaps a very passionately, thought out issue for oneself, but it feels like the response is, I left Labour because I wanted to, because it felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe this will ring true for other people, maybe it won't. My initial pass when I saw that interview is yeah, okay, so that sounds to me like I did it because I wanted to. No other reason, none given, none really considered. But then I had a wee think about it, and I was like, yes, I am looking at this from a purely white European view of how Parliament is supposed to work. And isn't that the thing that we kind of bang on about, is that maybe looking at it from a Eurocentric point of view is part of the problem that we have in this country. So I think that's true. At that point, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, if your heart's not in it, fair enough.
No, but
why would you be in the party?
I think that's true. I think neither of us can kind of speak to what it feels like for Māori to do things in a Māori way, but all of us have a gut feeling sometimes. You know, like you just go, no, it just doesn't feel right. Like this job offer that's coming, it's, you know, the pay's good, they seem nice, but it just doesn't feel right. We've all had that at some stage. That's the vibe I get from her, is saying like, it's like she's not saying that it doesn't feel right. Maybe she's saying to stay with Labor didn't feel right to continue. She wanted to move on.
Isn't that the whole thing? Is like you've got to go, don't go with your heart, you know, look at the facts and go with your head.
Yeah, well, I struggle. To be honest, I struggle.
Best or only way, right?
No, I struggle with it as well. And we're going to get on some more of the clips now. We'll play one of them now, because one of the issues she might have is not being able to get back into Parliament. So then, of course, you got to go being a part of Te Pāti Māori and not being in Parliament, or being a part of Labor, moving up through the ministerial rankings and being in the seat of power. Now, I'm not suggesting one's better than the other, but that's a part of the conversational process. And the reason I say that, and you'll hear Rawiri talk about this, I think in the last clip I'm going to play, is that the seat she's going for has basically been held by Labor since the 1940s, bar one term that New Zealand First got it. So this is not a done deal that you're going to swap parties and then continue on, you know, following your puku and being effective for Māori. Because if you're outside of Parliament, you've lost your chance to be an impact in government. Now, all of that is to be played out. We'll see what happens. Second question, though, is a real quick one. She got asked, why didn't you tell anyone you were leaving? We all know that she basically bailed and didn't even tell the Prime Minister. Why did you do that? And this was the answer.
So in this place, trust is really hard gained and easily lost. My whānau have been the bedrock of everything I've done all my life, including being in this place. Tikanga Māori says you go back to your trusted sources, and I did that with my own whānau. I did that with my wider supporters. I did that with my cousin Heather Te Aue Skipworth, and I did that with the marae. And I did let the President of the New Zealand Party know of my decision.
So Tikanga would also say that you have colleagues within the Māori caucus who have stood by you through the ups and downs over the years. And my understanding is that they're hurt. Some of them are angry as well, that there was no connection with them about your decision.
Like I said, this was a whānau decision, and I went back to my trusted sources, and we made this decision that was best in our interest.
Why couldn't you go to the Prime Minister? He's your boss.
Yep, so like I said, trusted sources, timing, tikanga, and I prioritised.
This is an important point because it comes up later on. Because to me, she's talking about going to people she trusts. She didn't go to the Prime Minister. To me, that implies, how I hear it, she doesn't trust the Prime Minister. Now, that comes up later on. I just wanted to pull that out and point that out to make sure we're aware of what's been said here, because something gets said a little bit later in the conversation.
Who I needed to let know, and I did inform the President of the party. So I let them know when the decision was final. And I did that last Wednesday morning.
Do you not trust the Prime Minister?
No, I trust my family.
Now, that seemed black and white. Do you not trust the Prime Minister? No, I trust my family. Now, I'm pretty sure I've got this clip. She said that she was asked if she felt shackled, because this is a term that's been bandied around. Did you feel shackled in the Labour Party? I.e., the way I would interpret that, Chewy, you tell me if you get it the same way. You know, you think about being shackled down, being tied down, being restrained, to being able to speak and be yourself in all freedom. That's how I would hear that. So Jenny May asked about being shackled for Labor. Were you shackled in Labor?
I didn't feel I was heard. I've now joined a party that I know my voice and those I represent will be heard.
I want to go back to what we initially talked about in terms of the Prime Minister. You said that you trust those within your whānau, and you said you didn't trust the Prime Minister. Why not?
No, I didn't say I didn't trust the Prime Minister. That's what you said, Jenny May. What I said is I went to my trusted sources. My whānau has given 23 long, loyal years of service to the Labour Party. They were Parakura's campaign team for 13 years. They're my campaign team for 10. We have done the right thing by ourselves, putting our whakapapa first, and I'm not going to apologise about that.
So that was why I pulled that. I just wanted you to see. And there's one more bit here as well, because this talks to Rawiri as well. And Ikaro Rāwhiti is the seat that she'll be sitting in. And the question is, can they win it? And Rawiri gets involved in this answer.
Well, that's where the shackles corridor comes in that you just talked about, Jenny May, is that, yes, it has been shackled with the Labour Party since 1943, to be quite honest. Broken once by New Zealand First, and gone back to Labour. I think this is an opportunity for Te Ikaroa Rāwhiti and a strong opportunity to have an unapologetic voice here in Parliament for the very first time. And like Meka has said, she'll continue to be the advocates for Ikaroa Rāwhiti Pautakaha. And we're looking forward to the election. We're looking forward to what Meka brings to the kaupapa.
So a strong voice that they've never had before, implying, of course, Labour's never done anything for Māori and Ikaroa Rāwhiti, even though they've held it for other than 3 years for the past, 60, 70, 80-ish years. So that's sort of a summary of what was said this morning, Chewy. I've watched it a couple of times. That last comment in particular, what I get from Rawiri is basically it feels like, it's my paraphrase now, he's saying that Labour takes the Māori vote for granted. Because, they've been shackled. Labour has shackled that seat. That's what he said. And it feels like he's saying that Māori have basically... And I think about, you hear this a lot. You hear it a lot with political parties. Like, the Conservative parties are typically... They can take advantage of their Christian vote, for example, because they're not going to vote anywhere else. And what Aure is saying, I think quite clearly, at least for Ikaroa Rāwhiti, is that the Labour Party, who's held it for so long, have done nothing for Māori. And they want to bring a change. That's how I hear it, at least anyway.
Yeah, look, I've been chewing on this because
chewing.
Let's be honest, they're not talking to people like me. They're talking to people. They're talking to Māori, unapologetically talking to Māori.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I don't really have a problem with it. Like, I mean, if she's not happy in the Labour Party, if her heart's not in being in the Labour Party, cool. Jump, resign, join another party. I've never really had an issue with the waka jumping law, all of that sort of stuff, and we're seeing a very similar thing play out with the Greens as well. Someone who's not happy with what's gone on, whether it's process or position or trusting people, whatever. The end result is two parties have lost 2 sitting MPs to another smaller party going into an election.
Sharma, Nash, there's other bits and pieces that are going on there as well.
Yeah, but then they haven't gone to the Māori Party.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying, and there was talk as well about Kiri going to the Māori Party as well. But
that's right. She's retiring now. She said that.
Well, she's independent right now.
I think, she's independent now, and then at the election is retiring. I think was the latest thing I saw.
I agree with you, right, about the waka jumping. I don't think it's a huge problem. Obviously, if it's someone in an electorate seat, then they need to be reassigned. I do think, however, and it's not really a situation with this issue, but let's say that the left government had a 1-seat majority, and then they left. That's the waka jumping. You got to be careful with those things as well. So,
but I think
my only thing is, and this is part of the conversation that have been coming out. When you're a minister in or outside of the cabinet, or you're an associate minister, you know a lot of the inner workings of that party that the other parties don't know. So there is still a question, though, around intellectual property, no matter who it's for, whatever political party it's for, and plans for the election. There might be things that are known, so there is a little bit of commercial sensitivity to it, which sounds weird talking about politics, but I do get that part of it. But in general, if you're not happy in the job you're in for the company you're working for, then you move. And you see if you can get the same or better job with the other company, represent the new customers with the other company better. I don't have a huge problem with that generally, but I do acknowledge there are some more minor details, a couple of layers down, that need to be figured out appropriately.
I mean, was she a list MP?
Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know where it comes to as far as what happens when you're a list MP and this sort of thing happens, but I would say that, like, if you're leaving and you're a list MP, so you haven't been voted in by your electorate, as an example. If you're a list MP, you're just gone, and you're replaced by the next person on the list.
I think because of their majority, Labour doesn't have to worry about that this time around. But yeah, if it was a closer situation, yeah, I think that would be the case. But because they've got a majority and we're only 6 months out, then it's not quite the same issue, is it?
Yeah, it's certainly a strange one. I mean, there's a couple of comments in the chat of like, good luck to her, but why did she do it this way? Yeah.
Well, let's have a look at that, because it goes on. Barry Soper wrote a piece today about Māori Party don't understand how Parliament works. And that kind of comes back to the story that then happened after that breakfast meeting, Māori Party went into the House today and wanted to welcome their newest member, but did it in a way that was sort of against the rules. Now, you know us, we don't care about breaking rules. Who cares? They're rules. Rules are meant to be broken. But there still is a way that things happen, and that still means that you could come up for criticism about doing things outside of the norm. And it's not that I particularly care, but what you have to do is, if you accept that people are just going to do what they want when they want, then you can't complain about the other people who you don't like doing what they want when they want as well. So that's why you have protocol and that sort of thing. Anyway, Te Pāti Māori pretty much got kicked out of Parliament today. Let's have a look.
Making way for Meka Whaitiri. Moving into the House, a new woman taking a new seat in her new political home, Te Pāti Maori. Problem is, this was all against the rules, the Speaker cutting the audio feed to House proceedings, silently trying to bring the House to order. And we could speak,
Rawiri Waititi will leave the chamber.
Ordering Te Pāti Māori out.
We've been punished for doing our jobs and for ensuring that Meka had a safe transition over in the House.
Meka Whaitiri remained to deliver an explanation of her decision to waka jump.
The calling that comes deep from within my puku.
She was cut off too.
Member will resume her seat.
I want my voice to be heard, Mr. Speaker.
That's what Whaitiri says her move is all about.
I'm joining a party that doesn't censor the voice of wahine Māori.
Was there a specific policy? Was there a specific...
It is quite hard to sell that publicly when the Ngāi Mahuta has like the second or third most powerful position in the country. Maybe this individual wahine Māori was censored. Maybe that's true. But to say it like this is what Labour does, I guess without knowing 100% sure, when the Ngāi Mahuta has such a position of power all over the world, it's hard to swallow that like it's a Labour stylistic political tactic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But maybe she, in her own personal stuff she has, and there's an element of, I've been silenced, fine, I don't have no idea. But when you look around at other Māori wahine voices not being silenced, you're like, well, maybe not.
specific issue that you felt that you weren't free to talk about?
There's a lot of challenges as Māori MPs about compromise in this place.
Her former Labour colleague's still perplexed. She still hasn't been in touch.
There was a lot of sadness and disappointment. People weren't sure why Meka left.
The Ngāi Mahuta offered a karakia, a healing process with the Labour Māori caucus. Meka Whaitiri declined.
It's disappointing. A lot of this has been.
I respectively declined that because the healing of my wairua and the restoring of my wairua was done on my marae.
And I, for one, I feel aggrieved by that.
They're welcome to come to my marae if they would like to do that.
Not the only invitation Te Pāti Māori's extending, it seems. President John Tamahiri coy on whether any more Labour MPs would be jumping ship.
That's something we're going to have to talk to you about very shortly.
Who?
I've spoken to a number of our Māori members and I've not seen any evidence to back up those, that speculation.
Labour's Māori caucus even held a meeting about locking in for Labour.
My nomination's been confirmed.
Full commitment in terms of the Labour Party going forward.
Everyone's committed to winning the election.
I think probably we've landed where we're going to land in regard to the election. It's just too close.
But here's a candidate ripe for the picking, former Green MP Elizabeth Kirikiri making a grand return as an independent MP. She resigned on Friday after being investigated for sending that crybaby text to the wrong group chat.
The door's open for her to join you?
We could have those conversations with Kirikiri if she wants to.
For now, celebrating their new colleague.
Freedom, liberation.
Liberation from Labour's supposed shackles and censorship.
There you go. So there you go, Chewy. There's the story from today as well. I don't know. As we were both saying, it doesn't feel like a particularly big deal. I feel like it would be a bigger deal if there was a slim majority in Parliament, but there's not at the moment, and there's an election in a few months' time. So
yeah, I don't have a massive issue with it. As far as Te Pāti Māori getting thrown out of Parliament, like there's so many politicians being thrown out of Parliament
for sure
because they've done something out of order. That's just part of it. And look, I would love to see more Māori processes and Māori consideration in our Parliament rather than it just aping how the British did it, all of that sort of thing. I don't have a problem with Te Pāti Māori standing up for what they stand up for. I think that's a valuable voice and if they rattle people's cages, so much the better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It seems to annoy David Seymour, so there's a great big tick for me. I'm glad that happened right next to him. But it's also one of those things. If you don't want to lose MPs, if you want people to stay in the party, obviously either they're going to be happy and a good fit, or they're not. You know, and if you're not happy where you are, get the hell out of the way.
And
go
it's not
where you are going to be happy.
not uncommon, you know. National MPs in Winston Peters go to New Zealand First, form it. You know, national MPs go to ACT. You know, it's not an uncommon situation. It's not necessarily common like all the time, but this is not an uncommon situation. And I mean, I'm actually really intrigued now whether she gets back into Parliament, because she's made this move. And look, if you're following your heart and you're following your gut, your puku, then whether you get in or get out, then I guess you've made the right decision. But I guess, and I know this might be a bit annoying to some people, but I do think about the game of politics. You know, I've talked about this before, and I always feel you can do more for your constituency being inside the tent, looking out, rather than outside the tent throwing stones in. So if you've just given yourself an opportunity because you wanted a chief for Māori, and in making that decision, you end up being out of Parliament, you know, if you're following your gut, all more power to you. It's the right decision, but I wonder, to getting things achieved, how that will actually work out. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think her future will clearly come down to how well the Māori Party does, and how many of their list MPs, or whether she can win a seat. Yeah. And I mean, again, she's not selling her case to me. I'm not her target audience.
Well, I mean, I'd look, to be honest,
how will she be received in her electorate?
Yeah, but Māori Party is a viable vote for me. Like party vote, Māori Party. I don't have I don't know who I'm going to vote for. I mean, I feel pretty confident it won't be ACT and it won't be National. But other than those two, I mean, I'm only talking about the major parties, and it won't be New Zealand First. You know, but my three options that I'm looking at the moment are probably Māori Party, Labour, Green. That's probably where I sit politically. I mean, people know this is no secret. I know that most people who work in media are like, oh, I can't say what I'm going to vote for. You know very clearly where both you and I sit politically, and they're the three parties who sit in that political world. So, yes, whilst I might not be getting a seat vote for me, unless they run someone in Dunedin, I mean, they are talking about running some candidates in some general seats, but they are a viable voting option for me, for a party vote. So, we'll see.
I probably wouldn't vote for them, but I love the fact that they're there. Like, I think that's something that has been missing for a long time.
I'll tell you one thing that'll stop me voting for anybody, right? Whether it's Top. I mean, Top could have been an option, but, or maybe, I think I spoke to Debbie about this when we talked to her a couple of weeks ago, is that if they won't give out their allegiance before the government, before voting day, like before election day, then I can't vote for them. Because, for example, Top's a good example, and John Graham has just said no love for Top. I really like chatting with Rafe, and I like the stuff that he says, and I like what he says. But he said to me they're actively going to sit in the cross benches. And I'm like, I don't want to vote for someone who might keep my political party out. Like, I sit on the left. I don't want to vote for someone who then might end up meaning the other side gets in, even if they don't help them in. But if they're the reason that the other side gets in, I'm not going to vote for you. So I'm not. I said this to Raf to us when we were talking. I said, I'm not going to vote for a party who pledges to sit across benches, because I want to vote for parties that are going to help get the side of politics in that I want to see run the country in. I'm not going to vote for someone that's going to help potentially keep them out. So if like the Māori Party, I feel pretty safe with, because, you know, basically in that conversation I had with Debbie a few weeks ago, she ruled out National and she ruled out ACT, but she didn't rule out sitting cross benches. Now, sitting cross benches could end up keeping out a left bloc. So maybe that may, and if they don't rule out, maybe that does mean that for me, I'm not it. But we'll see. We'll see. Is there anything in the chat about that conversation we've just had before we go into this last one about teachers'
do it
salaries?
real quick, because we've been talking about teachers, and now we've gone past the hour, so we're gonna have to crack on.
And we're about to go behind the leadership wall, so everyone's gonna miss it. No, I'm kidding.
So comments about what we were just talking about. V Bunch says, I don't believe she'll be happy in any party.
Yeah, maybe.
John Graham with a big call: just abolish political parties. That would solve all of this. Probably would.
Could you imagine every single vote you had in the House would then have to be, you'd have to lobby every single MP for every single vote. It would be a nightmare.
But see,
John.
I don't like voting blocks. I don't like when the party whip comes around and says, right, everybody's voting this way.
Here's my
It
favourite.
doesn't agree with me.
Gareth. That's my favourite for today.
Yeah, I know. That's the big shock for the night, isn't it? Pat won't vote for ACT. Just, ugh. Emma here says, I think the message in Te Pāti Māori is a Māori-centric kaupapa, whereas Labour's is not. I think that's fair.
Yep.
Free Soul, as a member of the Napier Labour Party, our next meeting will be interesting.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Time to Fly says she has the right and good luck to her, but an explanation for her process is rather pathetic. I don't know if it'd be that strong, but yeah, it seems a little bit weak to us. Maybe it lands better with a different audience. I don't know. DIY Guru mentions after Meka was disciplined for bullying, she was bypassed by newer Māori Wahine MPs promoted to various ministerial roles. She was pissed off. So maybe it is a little bit of hurt ego. Yeah.
I got hurt feelings. The day after my birthday is not my birthday, Mom. Sorry, it's a bit of Flight of the Conchords there because we had to get it out there. Right, let's have a look at the last story of the day. And this is really interesting. There's a really interesting article, which I don't actually accept personally. Well, actually, I should be careful. I need to see the research to accept this. On News Talk ZB today, New Zealand Work Research Institute director argues there's evidence sexism may be lowering teacher pay. I'd like to see the evidence. That's what I'd like to see. Certainly there is a case for investigating whether sexism is lowering teachers' pay. The Ministry of Education is looking into whether teachers are paid badly because of gender, a claim made by the Post-Primary Teachers Association and the Educational Institute. The majority of teachers are women, with a base pay scale ranging from $51,000 to $90,000 annually. New Zealand Work Research Institute's Associate Director Catherine Ravenswood said decades of research have shown female-dominated occupations are paid less, partly because of how we view women's work, but also because of gender discrimination where we just pay women less. It's the pay gap, the gender pay gap is a fascinating conversation. We're not going to get into it today. I'd like to see the research. Maybe we will revisit that another night. So the question I asked you guys tonight on Twitter, and we've had 50 votes or so in there, is, in your opinion, what would be a fair salary to pay a senior teacher with no management responsibilities? Someone in the chat said, how many percentage of teachers are senior teachers? I don't know the answer to that question, but when I say senior teacher, that basically means getting to the top of your pay scale. And that just comes with time, right? You get a pay jump each year and you get to the top of it and then you are the top. But it's not about anything else, right? So don't think about when I said senior teacher as in a senior responsibility. It's to the top of the pay scale. And it's interesting that 3/4 of the people that responded said between $70,000 and $90,000. $90,000 at 50%, $17,000 at $80,000, $90,000, 50%, $80,000, $70,000 about 8%, and 25% of people, 1 in 4, said $100K, $100,000 plus. So here is actually what teachers earn. This is primary. Now, actually, I'll just show you because actually primary and secondary are exactly the same. Like they're exactly the same, the pay scale. So I'll just show you one of them. So the starting salary, if you've got a diploma of teaching, right? So that's no degree, no nothing, just diploma of teaching, is $51,000, right? And the maximum salary you can earn is $85,500. And then you go through various, other iterations. And basically you get to the top, whereas if you've got your master's or a PhD, the most you can earn as a teacher is $90,000. Now remember, that's not a principal, that's not the most as a DP, that's not the most as a teacher in charge of English. That's, when I say just, not meaning to minimize, that is just a classroom teacher with no other responsibilities. What does that mean? Because see, what we're hearing at the moment is teachers don't get paid enough. And my question is, as someone who's, and look, this is not, as I was going to say, in my head that sounded bitter before it came out. Someone living off the bones of their ass, $90,000 sounds quite good to me. But in general, I'm not in a profession with a degree and qualifications and looking after 100 school kids, and it's not the same thing. But we do need to ask the question, if teachers are saying we're not getting paid enough, how much are they getting paid? And when we find out, does that change the conversation at all? Likely not. According to 3/4 of you guys, right, anywhere between $70,000 and $90,000 seems fair to you. And the maximum that teachers can earn is $90,000. So that's in that ballpark. What it does say for a lot of people, though, I think the starting salary at the beginning teacher is way too low. Now, I wonder if that's the conversation to be had here as well. Is it that teachers aren't paid enough? Or is it that beginning teachers early on aren't paid enough? Like, what do you think of a $90,000 salary, Chewy, for being a teacher? Like, just in general, is it far too little, or does it feel like an okay salary, or what?
The money sounds okay to me, but the question is, what's the expected workload with that?
Yep.
You know, it's very easy to think of teaching being a 9 to 5 job, but we very definitely know that that's not the case.
Yep. It's 9 till 3, Chewy. It's even better. I'm kidding.
and as I say to my teacher friends, and you get all of those holidays.
Yeah.
And then I start ducking chairs and stuff. Look, my understanding, talking to a friend of mine that left the teaching profession, and from talking to someone who is a teacher currently at the moment, is those first 5 years can be absolutely brutal.
Yep.
And the both of them told me exactly the same thing. So the guy that I know that was in teaching and left, he was there for less than 5 years. And the one that is still there, the figure that she gave me was that 50% of teachers that go in are gone in 5 years.
Yeah.
So I'd say it probably is a money issue at that level, that entry level point. And then when we get up to sort of 90 to 100K, is the question that the workload's wrong. Do we have enough teachers? Are they trying to do too much with too little? You know, because it's always the argument when you're talking about strike is pay and conditions.
Yep.
So if you can't improve one, can you improve the other? If there were more teachers that lasted out of those 5 years and continued on with that career, would the guys that are further on in their career have an easier time of it and go, yeah, this is a fair compensation for my time and effort?
Yep. Yep. And look, the other thing...
I think that also the levels of political interference with their jobs, the expectations that we have for teachers and what they do with their kids, the levels of parental interference into their job now is also much higher. Like the satisfaction must be out the door. So yeah, again, it's pay and conditions.
So let's look into that as well. And I actually think one of the things is, and I'm looking at the starting salary up here, right? And look, we love the people who work in a supermarket. We need them who work in a supermarket or in a petrol station or like an entry level job. You can walk straight out of school, all right? 17 years old, no qualifications, no nothing, and be on about $46,000. It's about what minimum wage is, $47,000. Mm. Or you can go to teachers training college and university for 3 years, possibly come out with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of debt and earn, $100 more a week before tax than them. That seems wrong to me. So yep. I wonder, and I think I've done these numbers before, I could go and find them perhaps, but I haven't. In Australia, the difference is the top end is not that different for a lot of teachers in some of the states, but the bottom end starts a lot higher. So like rather than, let's say 50 to 90, it might be more like 75 to 110. And a 25-year-old starting on 75 is very different than a 25-year-old starting on 50. And let me also tell you something else. I trained as a teacher, but remember, the very best thing that ever happened to the teaching education system in New Zealand was me leaving teaching. But it means I had lots of friends, and I was intermediate school and primary school, lots of friends who stayed in it. The first 5 years are brutal, but after that, it gets a lot easier because what happens in teaching, not to kind of burst the bubble here, is in those first 5 years, you're developing all these resources, you're teaching all these new things, but then you start reusing them. And the job becomes a bit easier. The planning becomes a bit easier. The workload doesn't on the other end, but the front end of teaching becomes a bit easier because you haven't done all that, have to do all that same work again. You've got a unit plan that you're going to use every second year for myths and legends or whatever it is, and it gets filed away and you bring it out and you use it again. Now, I'm not saying that to demean what's going on, right? But that's the reality of, especially within that primary school sector, of what happens. I think the same could be said for secondary school. We all know about our high school English teachers teaching the same book every year. One flew over the cuckoo's nest, whatever it is. It's so I'm not saying this to demean it, but that also comes into the conditions, Chewy, is that there's always a lot of work, there's always a lot of that, but it also, as you get more experienced, it gets easier because you're more experienced, like every job does, but it also gets less time consuming because you start to be able to utilize and use things that you've done last year again this year. So you get paid better and your job gets easier, which is probably why, as you said, that 5 year threshold is such an absolute bastard to kind of get through. I wanted to show this as well to bring a context to this whole conversation that teachers aren't paid enough. And look, when I say that out loud, it kind of almost sounds like I'm saying they are. I'm not. I'm just looking at this hopefully objectively. And one of the ways to look at that objectively is to look at what salaries are like for other jobs around New Zealand. This is based on, this is a website called New Zealand Shores, and this is some numbers from 2022, arguably. An accountant or accounting makes 82 grand. These are averages according to Trade Me. Agriculture, 60. Architecture, 81. Automotive, 65. Banking, finance and insurance, 85. Construction, 72. Customer service, 53. Education, 62. So I guess that's the mid-range maybe of teaching, like between those new entrants or the beginning teachers and not. Engineering, 80. So you can see that not many, according to last year, are that much more than 90. IT, 124. Executive and general management, 116. So when you look at the scale of what could be earned, not necessarily the average, 90 grand seems to be upper middle of what the salaries certainly that are being listed from 2022, according to Trade Me, are as well. So just to bring context to the money thing as well, we need to have a look at what other industries and people earn, and as people have mentioned in the chat, also what other benefits they do get from it as well. And I agree, Chewy, it's not a 9 to 3 job. There's a lot of work, but there are also a lot of benefits when it comes to, Christmas holidays and that kind of stuff as well. Certainly more holidays than most people get. Again, not a criticism, just an observation. Yes, every teacher works through their term holidays, but then they also have good long holidays at the end of the year. Not a criticism, not meaning so therefore you're getting enough. Just a real observation. So when we line up all of those things we've just talked about now, and then ask the question, are teachers getting paid enough? What's the answer?
Look, I'm going to put up a piece of info that David in the chat put up. Average teaching salary is $84,658 per year. Entry-level positions start at $74,000, while most experienced workers make up almost $121,000 per year. And I guess the reason I'm mentioning this, we talked earlier about nurses and retaining them in New Zealand when they can get much better pay rates overseas. And I'd say teaching here is another example. Is the argument that wages in New Zealand in general are too low? Like, I mean, we looked at that list of jobs there.
Yep.
I do not do an important job. I sell cell phones, and I'm around 65,000 a year.
Right.
And I sit in a stall and I help people remember their Facebook logins. So in the scheme of public good, am I fairly compensated? A teacher has, How do you put a price on a job that has such an important role in society and has no profit margin?
Well, there's one other question to ask as well, Chewy, right? And this is, we have to be careful if we were in, like, when you take over the country, Chewy, and you become our benevolent dictator, you'll have to be careful with this
I can't
question.
nationalise the schools. It's already been done.
Why do people teach? Now, I would suspect they teach for the love of the job and the love of the kids.
So we don't need to pay them at all.
Well, this is why you have to be careful, because I'm not making that argument. But the driving factor, I don't think, is salary. So therefore, we have to figure out what is a fair and equitable salary to keep them in the job that they love. And
that's a fair statement.
I don't know whether $90,000 is too low or too high. I mean, I'm sure most people out there would probably like $90,000 a year. Again, please don't get me twisted. I'm not saying, they're fine. I'm just saying, let's be real about the conversation. When I was growing up, I had an uncle and aunt who were both teachers. He was a principal. She was a Scale A teacher. Obviously, this was in the 80s or 90s, so I don't know what they were earning then. But they'd be on the equivalent of that household of probably 200 grand today, because she'd be a Scale A senior teacher on 90 and he was a principal. 200 grand for a household is pretty good money for two teachers. So when we say needs more money, what does that mean? I just want it contextualized, and then I can offer an opinion. The opinion I have right now is beginning teachers get paid way too little, but I don't think I'm quite at the point yet where saying senior teachers get paid too little. I don't think I'm there, because 90 grand, it's not terrible, but I think 51 grand, basically a smidge over minimum wage for someone with a degree and likely debt from university and looking after your kids, is far too fucking low. That would be okay. So there you go. I've just committed to a couple of statements. I don't know whether I'm on board with 90 grand is too much, but I am on board with 51 for a beginning teacher. Certainly is by a long way.
And I think there you're looking at solving a couple of flow-on issues as well, right? Because if those people stay, then that improves the lot for everybody.
Yeah.
You got more experienced teachers doing more of the heavy lifting. So yeah, pay and conditions. Keep people in the jobs that they've trained for, and that you've banked on them being there for longer than a couple of years.
Yeah.
I have got a list. I know we're dragging the time a little bit, but I have got a list that's literally from my teacher friend who is
Sure.
going on strike.
Sure.
And I thought it was a really good list.
Bigger screen.
Sorry,
Zoom in. Bigger
I
screen.
don't know if it's going to look good if I do that.
Control zoom. Control scroll. There we go.
Oh, yeah, that kind of works. Okay, so would you be happy if your boss took 11 months to negotiate your contract?
Right.
Probably not. Would you be happy if
Can I answer that though? Once it gets negotiated, they will also get that 11 months back pay.
She covers that. Would you be happy if in that time there are only 2 offers?
Mm-hmm.
Would you be happy if you were offered a lump sum that didn't even cover the money that you'd lost through striking? That one, I'm like, well, that's kind of the risk you take when you strike.
For sure.
Would you be happy if the extras that were offered in the negotiations came at the cost of working conditions that you need? That doesn't sound great. Would you be happy if your pay was continuing falling behind CPI, meaning that you're earning less and less every year? Now, that's, I think, a struggle in every job at the moment because of inflation. Most people's pay rises aren't keeping up with inflation. Would you be happy if you're offered back pay that didn't backdate to when your contract originally ended? So that comes to your point there, Pat. Would you be happy losing approximately $5,000 in the 11 months your contract has been discussed? Would you be happy to continue
But what does that mean? How do you lose $5,000? No one's having money taken out of their bank account. What do you mean by lose?
I would say comparatively,
probably what that means is haven't been given what we asked for 11 months ago.
Yeah.
Anyway,
would you be happy to consider you having an increased workload with no financial help or resources to assist them with this? And we've again, pay and conditions. Those starting teachers, maybe they're just under-resourced, overworked.
Yep.
Would you be happy to have to rewrite and enact your workplace's policy with little or no support? And finally, would you be happy if 50% of your workforce left within the first 5 years of entering it? If you have answered no to any of these, then you understand why we are striking. The ministry calls the New Zealand curriculum world-class, yet does not give us the support, time and funding to implement government-directed changes and to deal with the pastoral care and student mental health and the funding for teacher aids and resources for learning disabilities and for smaller student-teacher ratios. Now, that's I think, a key thing, is like they always go, hey, look, there's a limit where there's too many kids in a class for one teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for years and years and years, we've blown that out and then gone, why are our education outcomes so bad? And if we talk about in an election year, why is Christopher Luxon the outcomes man all over this? So yeah, I thought that straight from a teacher's mouth, that's her case.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff in there that I mean, if I was talking to your teacher friend, I'd want to unpack quite heavily, because it's obviously a perspective from the side of that conversation. Again, not to say that I disagree with it, but it's a bit like getting any kind of headline saying I want to delve a bit deeper into it. So let's continue this conversation. But I think we should support teachers. We should support everyone. You guys should support us. That'd be an easy thing that you guys could do as well. If you want to get on board with what we're doing, you can head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. We're getting close to having 50 patrons, actually. It'll be lovely to get to that number. 50 by 50. Should we do that, Chewy? 50 by 50?
Yep.
And thank you to all our patrons who are already on board and who are already involved with what we do. We love you to bits. And remember, if you are, wanting to be a part of what we do, then when you sign up to be a patron, you become 22% more attractive. And I think if you're a teacher, you get a 22% pay increase. I think I've heard that somewhere. I can't confirm that, but I think I have heard that somewhere actually as well. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Anything you want to wrap up with here from the chat, Chewy?
Yep, DIY Guru. They pay more tax in Australia, including capital gains tax. Is that maybe one of the reasons that they can pay their teachers better and their nurses better?
It's a cycle, isn't it? But I did see a story the other day, which I didn't bring to the show just from time reasons, that maybe the land of milk and honey in Australia is not all it's cracked out to be, because there are a whole bunch of other costs that we're not seeing in the mainstream media that make your extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 of income disappear quite quickly. I'm not sure entirely about all of that, but there we go. I mean, the reality is, if you got paid an extra 10 grand, but then paid an extra 10 grand in tax, so they could pay you an extra 10 grand, it's a net zero. It doesn't make much sense.
No, we love cherry picking stuff out of Australia for better or worse. Cherry pick the bad. You got to look at the whole thing. Mr. Rob Burney here says, "Why should loving a job affect what I think that's affect what job that is what that job is worth? Is the suggestion that if you love something, you should be willing to do it for less?" Now, I know for a fact there are a lot of people that are in that boat. They're like, I am doing good, important work, but it's work that society doesn't value with an appropriate wage. People in mental health and community health and domestic violence and stuff like that. All of those guys are aged care was another one. Carers were talking about this a couple of years ago. It's hard to put a value on the work that they do.
Yeah. There's another comment from Rob there as well. We'll wrap up with this as well. It's like, it's pretty easy to avoid kids being interrupted, pay the teachers what they're worth. And I think, maybe I've done a bad job, but I think that whole conversation tonight has been, well, what is that? I mean, what is that? What is that number? What is that? How much would you pay for people to look after your kids? $1 million a year. Kids are worth $1 million a year. Can't do that. Yeah. So I think as well, there's a concept up there of we go, yep, of course. No, I don't think anyone, well, there are some twats in the chat who may disagree with this, but most normal people here don't disagree with that concept. But when you drill down into it, what is the number? We have to assign a number to it at some stage. What are they worth? And I don't say that in a derogatory way, like they're worthless. I'm actually literally saying, what is that number?
Yep.
And what is? And I'll say it again. I'm on board. Beginning teachers are not paid anywhere near enough. Should be much, much more, up at that 75 grand mark. I don't know if $90,000 is not enough to pay a classroom teacher. Like, I don't know if that's fair or not, but I definitely know that paying $51,000 to a beginning teacher is not enough. So I'm going to put a number on it. I'm going to put $75,000 on a beginning teacher. On a senior classroom teacher with no other responsibilities, 90 doesn't sound terrible. 100? I don't know. But what are they worth? It's such a hard question, because what it's worth to you, Chewy, like these people who are leaving teaching, right, because they're too stressed, if you offered them 200 grand, they probably wouldn't leave teaching. They'd finally be going, oh, for all the shit, it's worth it. But for someone else, 200 grand wouldn't touch the size of what it would be worth for them to go through the shit. So what are they worth? I don't know. That's the question.
I'm going to hit the Rob Burney combo comment button, and we'll go for number 3. Is it fair that when I was 29, I was paid more than my mum, who had been teaching her entire life? Bear in mind, when she started teaching, she could afford to buy a house on a teacher's salary. And again, that's one of the things. You've got to look at the whole thing. Government wages generally don't move as quick as, say, private sector does.
Well, again,
inflation and house prices has well and truly just butt-fucked everybody.
Yeah. But again, there's parts of that conversation that I can't join in on because I don't know. Is it fair? I don't know. Are you Tom Holland? Have you just done a Spider-Man movie at 29? Yeah, it's probably fair that you're earning more than your mum being a teacher. You know what I mean? It's like maybe not. I don't know. What's a teacher
Little known
worth?
fact, Rob Burney was a Spider-Man stunt double. You can't tell because of the leotard and the mask.
There you go.
That's what he was doing at 29. I know.
But look, I hope this is something that we've always done and we always will do. It's like I'm down. I mean, you know us. We're down for supporting these industries. I mean, it's one of the things we do constantly. But I'm also down for unpacking these things that we say. Pay them what they're worth. Yeah. What is that? How do we figure that out? I'm 29 and I was earning more than my mum. Okay. Well, what were you doing? Were you digging gold in the mines in Australia? Getting paid shit tons of money because you were producing.
I told you already, Pat. He was a Spider-Man stunt double.
I don't know. Yes, I am in fact Tom Holland. Oh, good.
So I personally, I think that's part of the larger conversation of like we need to tax wealthy people more to pay for these things that society needs.
Yeah, of course.
That's my answer.
Yep. Hey, Chewy.
Yes.
1 hour and 29 minutes and 22 seconds from our
Thank you
shortened
so
shows
much,
this week.
chat, for sticking with our rambling pinball conversation throughout tonight. It's been great having you here. The chat has been amazing. You guys are super good.
We're done for this week, and let me just tell you as well. And I know not to continue overtime pay. Yeah, well, we get 00, JK. Thanks, mate. You all know what happened last week. You're all up to date on that kind of stuff now. But just so you know, for this week, I'm doing my best to do very little. So whilst I did put some clips out this today, I felt like I was up to it. I may not tomorrow. I may not on Thursday. There's no Friday night show. If you're following the Let's Talk Funny, the comedian conversations, there's none of that this week. So I'm taking this week real easy. So other than Chewing forcing me to stay here for twice as long as I need to, the rest of the week I'm going to take super easy. So although we're doing normal shows and we're going to be here for these, it feels like life will return to normal probably next Monday for the overall content coming out of DOC Studios. So yeah, I think that's about us, Joey.
Just to play us out, one last thing. Promise, this is it. I just want to highlight one of the best conversations I've seen in chat.
Go on.
Okay. I do it for you. Starts with, some people need a job key spelled out to them. Emma jumps on that immediately with JOPKE.
Job key.
And then I do it to you responds with fat fingers. Don't judge me, Emma. And then Emma comes back with I do it for you. I'm imagining King Charles's fingers.
I was imagining,
well done, team.
I was imagining
Amazing.
everywhere, everywhere, all at once. Fingers. That's what I was imagining.
Yes. All right, that's it.
All right.
We've lost control of the chat, the show, the whole works. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, team.
It's been a really good discussion.
See you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Stay safe, everybody. Hooroo, be well.
Cheers.